afternoon, all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. This is New Frontiers, an exploration of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I am your host, organizer of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group, Josh Pritchett, and I am joined today, as usual, by my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. Chris Pabon. Good afternoon, Chris.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Muy buenas tardes a todos nuestros oyentes que nos están viendo en la tarde en vez de la mañana. Very happy welcome to everyone who's seeing us in the afternoon. Don't adjust your dial instead of the morning.
Yes, we decided that because of technical issues, we had to do this show in the afternoon today, and we just get everything lined up. So, but we are here now, and we are here to talk about Episode 8, Under the Cloak of War. Okay, and as the title suggests, this is a Klingon-centric episode, and we are referring back to the Federation-Klingon War, which started in the first season of Star Trek Discovery. And we are it has to do with a lot of things that went on, the pain and suffering of war. And without further ado, let's hit it and get into this week's episode. So, the Enterprise rendezvous with another Federation starship to pick up and transport an ambassador. But this is a very unusual Federation ambassador. This is Federation Ambassador Roll, who originally did not start off as a Federation ambassador, but was originally a Klingon general and was actually considered by many in Starfleet to be a war criminal because of his actions at the Battle of Jirak, which was a moon that Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel were at during that battle, as medical, as MASH unit type people. And apparently the battle was one of the bloodiest in Klingon and in the war. And in fact, because many people aboard the Enterprise, including Chapel, Mbenga, Ortegas, and others, were in that war or had close friends or family that were in that war, Roll's presence is very much a triggering point for them. But the thing is, Roll is sincerely acting like a man of peace, that he basically has left behind being a Klingon warrior. He defected to the Federation and has been trying to improve relations, serving on the Federation Diplomatic Corps, but also trying to bridge the gap between the Federation worlds and the Empire. Needless to say, there are many who are not buying it. When we first see Ortega, she's talking about recounting the things that she heard that Roll did, and Pike overhears that he's not happy with her. But then when Raul, Una, and Chris go down to the down to the lounge, Spock is there, and he has prepared some Raktajino for Raul. And Raul burns his hand on the cup, because the way you serve Raktajino is you serve it cold, but you serve it in a hot cup. Unfortunately, it was the wrong cup. But they take him to the sick bay where Mbenga sees Raul, and it brings back a lot of memories of being at the battle of being in this battle. And he starts having some flashbacks, including one that we see the great Clint Howard. For those of you longtime Star Trek fans will remember that Clint Howard has been a recurring actor throughout much of Star Trek. Chris, would you like to take it from here, please?
Certainly, thank you. So we see the story of the Battle of Jagal from the viewpoint via flashbacks, as you mentioned, from Mbenga and also from Nurse Chapel. And it's sort of like a mass unit, down to Mbenga hanging out in a hot tub when Chapel first gets there. And Chapel first thinks that he's going to report to the head nurse, but surprised the head nurse was killed, so she's now the head nurse. And so it's very traumatic for both of them, and it sort of leads up to a state dinner, if you may, that they're having on board to honor the ambassador. And you know, neither of them wants to go, but neither being Mabenga and Chapel, but they both decide, well, we're not going to give him the satisfaction. We can go. And as it's just really, you see in the flashbacks, it was really bloody and violent, and a lot of like people being beamed in, and the cases that are the most critical, Mabenga puts into the transporter buffer, which is something we saw in season one, is how he's doing with his daughter to protect her from dying from the disease. Just has her in the buffer, and every once in a while, like takes her out. So this is sort of where he got the idea for that. And so the state dinner comes up, and Ortega just does not want to go in, but Mabenga kind of convinces her, and the dinner is just going worse and worse, and everyone's agitated, including Chapel, and Spock tries to get the general or former general ambassador now to talk about Sun Tzu, and it sort of works, but Ortega's at one point just can't take it anymore, and like he gets up and leaves, which provides for an awkward moment. And then Chapel leaves saying, well, I'm going to go check on Ortega's. And then Pike, sensing that Mabenga is also quite uncomfortable, and you can see him, he's like physically grabbing the chair every time the Klingon is talking. Um, you know, Pike tells him, maybe you should go make sure that Chapel is okay with Ortega's. But before he can leave, the general says, I've heard that you're skilled in, forgive me, I forget the name of the Klingon term for this martial art. And Mabenga says yes. And this is also another flashback to the first episode, because we can see, and also from the episode where we see him and Pike and Laan being taken prisoner, there's these hints that he's a very skilled hand-to-hand combatant. And he says, yes, I am. And the ambassador says, it's been a while since I've been able to spar with someone. Would you indulge me? And so reluctantly, Mabenga says yes. And there's more awkwardness for everyone. You see awkwardness with Nurse Chapel, with Spock, where Nurse Chapel says, this is just one of those things you would not be able to understand. And Spock says, I do understand that at the moment you don't want to be with me. And so Spock leaves, and Chapel doesn't really know what to tell him. And then you see the sparring between Mabenga and the Klingon ambassador, and you can see that Mabenga is sort of holding back. There's a lot of animosity that's built up in there, and he asks the general this awkward question of like, so is it true that you butchered your own men? And he says yes, and that's how I got the nickname the Butcher of Jagal. And then he says, and like, who is the one who put up the most of a fight? And kind of a strange question, but he says it was Captain so-and-so. And then Mabenga's surprised when the general says, listen, like, you obviously fought in the Klingon Wars. Like, I want you to join me in this peace initiative, because, like, what better message than to see two adversaries both united in the search of peace? And Mabenga's still not quite buying it, because before the dinner, he actually tells Ortega, sometimes when you pretend hard enough, you may actually turn into that person. And so there is just a lot of awkwardness going on. Josh?
Yeah, so to clarify, the name of the Klingon martial art is the Mukbar.
Okay.
Yeah, I just happen to know that. Mbenga rebuffs Raul's overtures to try to make peace. And then Mbenga has a flashback to one night at Jagal, where he is approached by an Andorian member of Starfleet Special Operations, Special Ops, the Federation Navy SEALs, basically. And he asks him about if he's the same Mbenga who has like 32 confirmed kills by with unarmed kills. Like he, managed to kill some people, and probably they weren't all Klingons with his bare hands. And he asks him for Protocol 12. And Protocol 12 is that green substance that we saw in episode 1 of this season that Mbenga and Chapel used to fight the Klingons in order to escape when they were captured. And Mbenga refuses. He says, this is really bad. This could, the Protocol 12 could kill you. The Andorian tells him, look, we're going on a special op where we're going to kill this Klingon general because that's the key to winning the battle at Jagal, is they have to kill this general. And he needs an edge. And Protocol 12 will give him that edge. Now, those of you remember that episode, yeah, it can enhance strength, stamina, speed, alertness, and make it so you don't feel pain for a few hours. But it's temporary. It's not like genetic augmentation or something. Again, Mbenga refuses. And a bunch of Starfleet officers who were wounded, who were in the MASH unit, including one that Chapel and Mbenga saved by doing open heart chest compressions, all volunteered to go with the Andorian to try to kill this Klingon general. They go in there, they beam in, but then meanwhile, back in real time, Una goes to Pike and explains that they have a problem. Tensions are rising on the Enterprise, and it's because there are a lot of people who are inside it because of Raoul being there. So they decide to take a shorter course through a nebula to get him back to Starfleet headquarters so that they can prevent any further trouble. Then we cut back to another flashback. This one, the Andorians' mission failed. Everybody was killed. So Mbenga decides that he doesn't have a choice. He's going to take matters into his own hands. So he suits up in body armor, grabs some weapons, and the Protocol 12. He gives some to Chapel and says that, hey, if you need this, if it looks like you're going to be captured, use this on yourself. It will help you. He doesn't say what it is. And then he decides to transport into Raoul's headquarters. Then we cut back to real time in sick bay, and Raoul comes in to talk to Mbenga one last time. And Chris, would you like to take this part?
Thank you, Josh. So there was a conversation where Mbenga's alone with him, and he's very serious, and he says, I have to say no to your offer. And he has a box, and the ambassador's trying to say, are you sure? I mean, I think this would be of great value. And then Mbenga turns very dark, and he tells him, you were wrong in your answer when you told me it was Captain so-and-so who fought the hardest. Actually, it was Captain so-and-so, another name, who fought the hardest to prevent me from reaching you. And there are flashbacks where you see that Mbenga is fighting these 3 Klingons, and he does manage to wound Ambassador Rahl in the leg, which explains why he walks around with a cane now. And the ambassador is just completely shocked, and he says, it was you. And Mbenga says, yes, like, why did you have to come here? And Mbenga takes out the Klingon knife, the Dakra, I think is the name. Josh, you can correct me afterwards.
Dak Tang.
Dak Tang, thank you. The Dak Tang. And they proceed to be a scuffle where they fight very briefly. And Chapel, you see it from the viewpoint of Chapel now, of Chapel who walks in and sees the silhouettes of the 2 men at close quarters, and then one goes down. And then the next thing you know, Chapel is in front of Laan and Una, and she's saying that she walked in, she saw there's a fight that broke out, that Rahal attacked Mbenga, and it was all in self-defense. And in the background, you see that there's an analysis done of the dagger, and the dagger is saying it has all the blood of these 3 Klingon captains that were known to have been killed, and that's how Rahl got the name the Butcher of Jaal. And it seems like a pretty shut and open case, because how could Mbenga have that dagger? Well, they can't fathom why the ambassador attacked Mbenga, but only the ambassador could possibly have the knife that killed these 3 Klingons. And then you cut to a scene where um, um, the Captain Pike walks into the sick bay, and Mabenga's tried to fix sickbed too. And you see that early in the episode where he says, ever since the attack by the Gorn, it hasn't been working well. It breaks down every once in a while. So I'm fixing it again. I'm hoping this fix will be permanent. And Pike interrupts him and says, we've known ourselves a long time, haven't we? And he says, yeah. And he says, is there anything you want to tell me? And he says, no. He just came in, he attacked me in self-defense. And Pike says, there's probably going to be an inquiry about this. And he says, yeah, no, I understand. And you can see that Pike isn't quite buying it, but Mabenga is his friend. And again, how could he possibly have had that knife? And so he leaves, and you see Mabenga's finished in the sickbay bed. He departs, and you see the bed begins to flicker again with the message that some things that are broken can never truly be forever repaired and seen.
Yeah. And I thought that was a great scene with the bed as a metaphor. Because there's a lot about M'Benga I really want to get into, and a lot about Raoul as well, and as we get into the Gorn part of our recap here. But I think now is a good time for us to move into the good, the bad, and the Gorn. And for anybody who is watching us this afternoon, or if you're watching us later on our YouTube channel, please do feel free to comment. We'll try to answer your comments as we can. Okay, so I'll just start off here with what I thought was good. I thought it was great that, we have an ambassador, a Klingon, who is not just paying lip service to peace, that he genuinely, it seems to be very much wanting peace. So, peace between the Federation and the Klingons isn't just a Federation thing, isn't just a human and Vulcan thing. There are Klingons who clearly believe in peace, who want to have a peaceful relationship with the Federation in some way, because making war on them clearly hasn't worked. And it's, according to Klingon mentality, is more like, stand with the strong. And clearly the Federation is strong. But at its core, the Klingon Empire is ruled by a corrupt military dictatorship that just pays lip service to the codes of honor that Kahless established. So it's not like they really fully care about, the good of the average Klingon citizen. But Raoul, I think, definitely did. I think he saw that, the Federation is really strong and it could destroy us, but it doesn't have to. We don't have to destroy ourselves. We don't have to be at war. We could be friends with these people, and we could learn so much from each other. Because, yes, the Klingon Empire is ruled by a corrupt military dictatorship, but at its core, the Klingon culture itself is a very good and rich one. It has food, it has music, it has art, it has architecture, it has all these wonderful things that are just stymied by this dictatorship. And I think Raoul, realizing that he could not further the Klingon people by continuing to be a general in this corrupt dictatorship, left and chose to become a Federation citizen to try to make peace that way. So, Chris, what's something good you liked?
We're going to have to discuss this a lot in the Gorn, because I have a different take on the general. But I like the fact that it was so damn dark. It reminded me of Deep Space Nine, now classic and revered by the pale moonlight. You see that not everything is like, peace and tranquility in the Federation. I mean, yes, Pike's ship was sent away during the Klingon War, but now there are some people who served on other ships and Starfleet bases in the Klingon War. And you can definitely see there's some PTSD going on with Ortegas and Chapel. And you see that it was some dark times during the Klingon War. I mean, we saw a bit of it on Star Trek Discovery, but we really didn't get into the details. And here we get into the details, and we know that the Klingons are like, prefer to fight with their bat'leths. I mean, when the wounded are coming on, they're not wounded necessarily by phasers. I mean, you see people's necks getting cut. You see like stab wounds. I mean, the Klingons really prefer the hand-to-hand combat, and you see the dark and grittiness of like how bad it was. So I really like that they went dark here, and it's not just the Enterprise. I mean, they talk about how other ships there's been problems with Gaul because not everyone can forgive and forget. So the fact that they show that yeah, there's a dark side to these things, and we acknowledge that when you build something, sometimes there are dark times related to building something sustainable, and they showed this. So I'm really happy that we finally got to see some details of the Klingon War that we never really got to see in Discovery, and I felt a little cheated by that when I was watching Star Trek Discovery. Like there was dimensions of it, but they never really showed us. This time, they showed us, and it was again equivalent to, I would say, by the Pale Moonlight and Deep Space Nine, and also equivalent to the Siege of AR-99. Two really good episodes of Deep Space Nine that reflects on the heavy cost individuals of war.
Yes, I agree, and I think it's another. I agree with everything you just said there. That even though war still occurs, even in the distant future of Star Trek, and it takes a toll on humans, Andorians, Vulcans, Tellarites, Klingons, everybody. As much as I love the Klingons, as much as I love to do the Klingon thing, I recognize that as a species, Klingons could do with some great psychiatric help, because there's clearly a lot of post-traumatic issues that they hide behind a lot of bluster to not think about. That sometimes they're not always certain. And that was another thing, though. You have a lot of these Starfleet officers. This is something we saw in Star Trek 60 on Discovery Country, that it isn't just a lot of Klingons who don't want peace with the Federation. There are a lot of people in the Federation who don't want peace with the Klingons because they hate them because of Tukumba's War, which is what I call it, Tukumba's War, because of the blood and the viciousness of it and the horrors and what other people had to do to survive. They cannot let that go. There is some hatred there, and it's going to literally take another generation of Federation people and Klingons to get past that and become friends and allies. Because it's not. This is kind of a real heavy lift, right up there with pushing a boulder uphill, and it's really difficult for a lot of people that they can't get past that. But I think you're definitely right. I think I'm really glad, especially now that we have so many service people coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, and how many the veteran system isn't always helping. That these are people that are coming back with a lot of emotional and physical scars and really do need support. And I'm really glad this episode spoke. I hope it spoke to them. I hope that it spoke to a lot of people as to what people are going through. So what else we got, Chris?
The other thing I liked was the hint of, it's not easy between Chapel and Spock. As Spock's mom wisely said, it is very tough to love a Vulcan. And you see here that there's sort of an emotional disconnect because he, who's trying to suppress his emotions, can't really connect with the strong emotions that are coming from Chapel. I thought it might have made sense if, when they're writing the script, if he had suggested a mind meld and she had refused. They didn't go in that direction, but I thought that might have made more sense story-wise. But I'm glad that they showed that, listen, it's there's going to be some conflict. Like, I'm one of the people who are shipping them, but at the same time, we know that they eventually don't get together, and there has to be some reasoning why. And it could be this, that, they just are emotionally at totally different levels. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is kind of the seed of the breakup, much more so than Boimler coming in the crossover saying no, you guys cannot get together. Like, this makes more sense.
Yeah, I agree that because we know that Chapel and Spock are not meant to be together. I was actually talking with another friend, the possibility that maybe, because we do know from the TNG episode Sarek that Spock did eventually get married sometime after the events of Star Trek 6, but it never says who. Some people have said they thought it was Saavik, but maybe he got back together with T'Pring. Maybe that wedding did finally happen. or maybe it was somebody we never heard of. Maybe he did marry Nurse Chapel later on, many years later.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that before the series ends, we have some flash forward episodes that kind of fill in some gaps in Spock's life, because there are some chapters. I mean, I know the novels tried to write some stuff, but I don't think that those are canon, so we can't really say for sure what might have happened to Spock in this time period. Did he marry Savick or T'Pring or Chapel later? Why did he do the Kulinar? Why did he try to purge all of his emotions before Star Trek: The Motion Picture? What were some of the things that happened in the years between Star Trek VI and the Kelvin timeline? Or before he went off to Romulus? What were some things that he did during when he was at Romulus? So, hopefully one of these days, Ethan. I mean, I will say this: I think that there's no better actor than Ethan Peck to kind of tell us those stories someday. One other thing I'm going to mention is part of the good. One of the things I really liked, and I will expand on. I'd like to expand on a little bit more in the Gorn is Mbenga having a god complex. Okay, and there's more I would like to say about that, but Chris, we could go back and forth on that. Chris, do you have any other likes, or are you ready to get into the bad parts?
I think I'm ready to get into the bad parts. I will add that I did like that we got an explanation of what the green substance was in episode 1, that being Protocol 12, because I thought that kind of came out of left field, and I'm glad that the writers kind of cleaned that up and gave us a context of what it was and why he would have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got a feeling we have not seen the end of Protocol 12.
We may not have.
And I think that is going to cause Mbenga and Chapel some problems going forward. So, and it could also explain why it is when we first met Mbenga on the original series, why he was no longer the head medical officer of the Enterprise, and it was McCoy. But at any rate, so cannot say as I had a whole lot bad to say about this episode. I thought it was overall very good. I thought it was incredibly well acted, as always. Chris, what do you think?
So here's my thing, that I just had a little bit of trouble with, could he take the ambassador without Protocol 12 in him? I know it was sudden. I know it's hand-to-hand combat close, and he has all these confirmed kills in hand-to-hand, but still, I had a little bit of trouble thinking, like, without some help, if he could have taken and successfully stabbed the ambassador. Not outside the realm possibility, but I was just like, he's a Klingon, he's a human, you're fighting for your life. Unless he was so shocked at seeing the dagger, and then when he plunged it into him, maybe. But I just had a little bit of trouble, human versus Klingon there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could see where you're going with that. That kind of is out of the realm of continuity. On the other hand, Raul is older. He has injured. He's more injured. And Mbenga definitely looked like he was in better shape.
Yes. Well, we know, yes, he spars with Lahan.
Yes, he is a tough guy, and there's some other things I want to get into about some theories I have about Mbenga later on, but yeah, no, I could see that. Yeah, I think they were kind of like, okay, we've got to kind of do this, and Mbenga, I think is more of a stabber. He's not a poisoner, so he definitely, that I can kind of see where that's an issue in continuity, because Klingons are supposed to be physically stronger and more aggressive. That Grawl might not have been as aggressive, but he's definitely stronger.
Definitely stronger.
Than Mbenga. But
the other thing, Josh, was I'm a Clint Howard fan, of course, but they didn't really give him anything to do, so it kind of hinted at stunt casting, which is a term when you drop someone who's a recognizable face in. They don't really do anything that contributes meaningfully to the show. They're just sort of there. So I would have liked to have seen him be given a little bit more meat and potatoes. it was nice to see him there, but just sort of like we put him in there just because it's Clint Howard, and they didn't actually give him anything meaningful in the episode. In other words, that role could have been filled by anyone.
It would have been nice if he could have said, "Oh, hey, we're serving some Turin in the mess hall later tonight." A little reference back to the Cobra Mountain maneuver.
Or even if he dies, right? Then all of a sudden, M'Benga has to take over. It was just there needed to be a reason for Clint Howard to be there, and I just didn't get that.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see people, like I said, people who have been fans from the beginning recognize that Clint has been a recurring actor in various various Star Trek shows. I mean, most notably for me, outside of the Cobra Knot maneuver, is the episode with where the crew travels to the late 21st century and during this social upheaval. And Clint is a homeless person with schizophrenia, and Jadzia has to talk him down in order to get back some technology he picked up, but fortunately did not know how to use. So, but of course, he's shown up many times. I think he's played Ferengi a couple of times.
He has on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a great actor. He's been literally cast in almost every movie that his brother Ron has directed. So,
it's good to have Ron as your brother.
Yeah. I mean, and I just now did some genealogy. I found out that I'm a distant cousin of Ron Howard's. Yeah, Ron, if you're watching, I'm available, buddy.
And now, are you SAG?
No, I'm not. Well, no, you're right. No, I'm not available. I'm on strike. Okay. I'm on strike.
All right, because
Ron, when the strike is over, Ron, I'm available. Cousin,
if you want to break the line,
I'm not breaking the line. I'm not breaking that line, buddy. I wouldn't break the line, but
okay. All right.
Okay, so you ready to get into the Gorn?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. So a couple of things. First, I'm going to start a little bit with M'Benga and my theory about his God complex. Okay. So the first rule of a doctor is do no harm. And sometimes the second rule is you have to recognize when you just cannot save the patient. And certainly with M'Benga, with regards to his daughter, keeping her in the transporter buffer for several years while he was trying to find a cure. I mean, that in a way is playing God, that he's a loving father and no father wants to watch their child die. And yes, he did have the means to do it, but keeping her in and out of a transporter buffer for years, it's like thumbing your nose in the eye, thumbing your nose at death. You're going to make decisions. Likewise, deciding that Graal was going to die in that moment, that he was going to do this. Again, when we got the whole metaphor about the biobed not working since the Gorn attack, okay? And he says that line, I fixed it for now, but it'll probably always break down again. And then you wonder if he's talking about himself, and it's like, M'Benga, are you going to kill somebody again? I mean, and of course you had that whole backdrop about he had 33 confirmed kills in hand-to-hand combat. And it got me to think about his backstory, that maybe at some point before he was a doctor, he probably was a special forces operative.
Oh, he definitely was.
He definitely was. And that actually makes sense, because there are quite a few former special forces operators who have at one time or another left the military and become doctors, even surgeons, and they have the right mentality. They're already obviously used to a lot of blood and suffering. They are used to thinking quick under very stressful situations. Their special forces people are usually among some of the highest IQ people to join the military. So obviously there's that. So at one time, yes, when he was younger, M'Benga was probably Starfleet Special Forces. Very likely he was. And that he probably did kill quite a few people, who were enemies of the Federation in order to protect it. And before deciding he'd had enough of that and devoted himself to becoming a doctor and changing his life. And then, oh, wow, the Klingon War comes along. and suddenly these warrior instincts kick in again for him. I think as we go forward over the next 3 seasons, we are going to see more of that. We are going to see a darker part to Joseph Mbenga than we thought we were going to get. And I think that he's going to be a very different kind. He's definitely showing himself to be a very different kind of chief medical officer than we saw with Phlox, McCoy, Crusher, Pulaski, Bashir, or the holographic doctor that, or Hugh or any of the other medical officers we've seen on Star Trek. So, I'm not saying he's full on Hannibal Lecter, but I feel like, there's, you do kind of get this feeling about him. Like I said, I do think he does have a bit of a God complex somewhere in there. Chris?
So I wanted to enter the Gorn to talk about this, but I have a different take on General Rahl, which is I think this is a guy who saw the tables turned and saw that the Federation was sending someone to kill him, that when they wanted to kill him, they could do it. And so he sees like this supercharged Mbenga mowing through like his like elite circle of captains trying to defend him, not successfully, takes a wound in the leg, flees. And I think at that moment he's like, okay, if I join them, they're not going to kill me because I'm one of them. So I have a different take on why he joined. I mean, I hear you that, he thought the Klingon way wasn't quite working and he believed the way was peace. But I have to reflect on the words of Mbenga, said, if you pretend to be something enough, you become it. And so faced with like, they fail now, they may not fail the next time. So what if I join them? Then they would have no reason to try and kill me. So it's his motivation because, again, this is the guy who ordered anyone who's not Klingon, you kill them. But the minute that he saw the real butcher coming after him, I think that was like a, oh, crap moment. And so what's the old saying? If you can't beat him, join him. And so I think he decided to join Starfleet. And yes, he did some work afterwards that's very good, but the motivation, the core was there, not, I think, because of what he said, I believe in peace, but rather because, like, he saw that he was almost taken out and most likely would be taken out for these actions. So, can't beat him, join him.
I agree with some of what you said. I do believe that Krall was trying to be a man of peace, that I do believe he believed in it. But I believe that when he saw this human he didn't recognize, this human that had become as vicious and as dangerous as any Klingon he had ever seen, I believe he developed a sense of respect about the Federation, that it wasn't just some weak political alliance to be pushed aside and done away with, that these people were not cannon fodder, that these were warriors as strong, as tough as any Klingon, and he gained a certain respect for them. And he thought, maybe we could coexist as allies. Maybe we would be better, we would be stronger if we worked together instead of being enemies with each other. What could we do together? And I think he did become, and I think that we don't, I'm not disagreeing with you, but we also don't really, wonder, he did say, if they're not Klingon, kill them. I'm reminded of the Japanese generals during World War II, the Japanese high command, a lot of their officers who were ordered by the Japanese prime minister to attack America, to attack China and Korea, and do these horrible things. And how many of them had to have had some moral qualms about this and realize that, hey, wait a minute, if we attack the Americans, they're going to turn their entire economy and against us, and they will destroy us. I mean, Japanese, the Admiral Yamamoto, who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor, is said to have said that they had awakened the sleeping giant now. And, I'm wondering if Krall had that kind of feeling at some point when he saw Mbenga kill his men, that, yeah, I think we've seen the sleeping giant waken now. And he realized that, yeah, this is not going to go well for us because, to be honest, even though despite the events that we saw on Star Trek Discovery, I don't really believe the Klingon Empire was going to beat the Federation long term, because the longer the war went, the more I think it favored the Federation, because in the decades prior to the war, the Klingons had been locked in various civil wars with themselves. And by many accounts, many of the worlds within the Klingon Empire are not that resource rich, or they've been strip mined so much that it's hard for the Klingons to get anything out of them. And whereas the Federation had far greater resources to draw upon. But I think that, that's something the writers of the show didn't really consider. That, they just believe that, okay, the stronger, the more aggressive. But I'm not disagreeing with you about what you said. Maybe Krall pretended, but after a while, the pretending stopped and he really did become a man of peace. Or maybe he was the Star Trek version of Jakar from Babylon 5, that maybe he had been this warrior who was made an ambassador, and then he had an epiphany where he began to realize, yeah, we need to start learning how to make peace with our enemies, or we're going to be destroyed. Yeah, I don't. What do you think, Chris?
I want to ask you a different question. I want to ask you, so he is killed.
Yeah.
What do you think the reaction is to the Klingon Empire? Is it like, we don't care because he's a traitor? I'm like, oh, what happened here? What do you think the reaction was of the Empire?
I think there are some who probably hate him and probably feel like, good, he's dead, he's off to Greythor with the other Dishonored. And there might be some Klingons who are a little bit more forward thinking and thinking, yeah, see, we had this one Klingon who tried to seek peace with these, people who claim they love peace, and look what they did to him. They attacked him without honor. That there are Klingons who are willing to lie, if it furthers their goals in the universe. But I think that there are some Klingons, it's 50-50. There's some who are just glad he's dead. Then there's some who want to use his death to kind of further this divide between the Federation and the Klingon Empire, because peace and democracy are not in the benefit of a military dictatorship.
No, they're not. I mean, I think at the end with him is, I question that, again, his stay in motivation. I think that it's possible he really truly embraced peace, but I think at the very start that wasn't his motivation. But you're right that old wounds don't always heal, and that it does take a generation and a common enemy, which becomes the Romulans, and later the Dominion, to unite two peoples. And so they will eventually unite, but it's still going to be a ways away. And so there is still going to be tension, and there's still going to be like stuff that you see, even in Kirk's Enterprise, they're not trusting one another. And, Star Trek 6 shows us that, there are people who didn't want peace, that all they knew was fighting, and they couldn't accept the new reality, and they just wanted to do whatever they could to maintain the status quo and just keep on fighting.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like what we see here today is Vladimir Putin is definitely somebody that could not accept peace between Russia and the West. And his war in Ukraine is definitely a remark of that.
So,
but yeah.
Do you think that there's going to be blowback of this happening on the Enterprise for Pike? Because we already sort of got that hint during the trial that the judge advocate seems to have it in for Pike. And like the whole thing that was about Una really was to catch Pike. And like, well, when did you know that she was an armament? So this happening on a ship, is there going to be blowback for Pike?
Definitely. I definitely think that. I think the seeds were laid that the Vulcan ambassador in that episode definitely has it in for whatever reason for Pike, um, for some reason.
Yeah, I guess will be shown later. And I mean, so this whole part of this like blowing back on Pike, and it's I think that as well two things. One, I thought that it also shows a bit of the hypocrisy of the Federation that okay, armaments no, but we're totally fine if you're going to invent a drug like Protocol 12 that we can use because the drug's okay because that's going to wear off, whereas the armament is permanent. It's like so I'm calling bullshit there. Excuse my language because like it still affects someone dramatically, and even perhaps more so because the armaments at least it's part of like okay, this is something they're going to grow into, they're going to become accustomed to. It's going to be, the body's going to adapt rather than Protocol 12, which is like, okay, as he says, injecting this much adrenaline into your body cannot be good. I mean, even Mabenga, like,
Yeah.
admits that. And
Yeah.
and the other part is there were two storylines that we seem to have been given at the start of the season. One was this thing with Pike and the Judge Advocate General, and two, the Gorn. And like we were shown a map where we assume it's a Gorn warship that's like very close to Federation space. We talk about the refueling station. Oh yeah, this will help because it's right on the edge of go in space in case I don't know you have to send ships in. So these are two storylines I think are kind of left dangling, and we only have 2 episodes to go to try to like show
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. I think that we're gonna have a season. We're gonna have a cliffhanger ending. That's
Yeah,
all there is to it.
I agree to that, and I was hoping this season we'd see Captain Angel and perhaps Cybok, but I think we're going to run out of time, and we're going to have a bit of a wait for the next season because of the writer's strike. And again, totally support the writers and actors strike.
Yeah.
But one of the consequences, and we can talk about this, like at our season finale, is this: we're going to have to wait longer, because they had just started filming season 3, so but this happened, and usually, you film for about 3 months, and then it takes about 9 months to put in all the special effects, seamlessly meld everything in, and I don't think they'd finished filming yet.
No, I doubt that, and I think it. Hey, look, this is the fault of the people in the front office who are giving themselves hundreds of millions of dollars in raises, and they want to screw the actors out of their residuals, out of it's they want to take digitally scan in some guy playing a red shirt in an episode and keep reusing that image over and over again without paying that person. That's wrong. And we could go on, but the bottom line here is we have to support the people on strike, because they're the ones making Star Trek. They're the ones making Star Wars, Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica, Doctor Who. Doctor Who's British, so
British, yeah.
yeah, but Marvel, DC, all the other stuff we enjoy has science fiction and horror fans. And if they're not getting paid, if we're not seeing our favorite actors, um, you know, if we're not able to support them, what are we supposed to do? And we need to support them because they bring a lot of joy to our lives, and this is when they need us to step up for them. So
Not now, but when we do our season wrap up, I do want to talk a little bit more about the strike itself because
yeah,
I think one problem I have with the strike is that it just sort of doesn't feel like a strike yet.
yeah.
So I want, but not now. I want to talk about that season.
Well, I think I think we should get in, but I think it feels right now a little bit like the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, there were still a lot of things that we could watch on Netflix and other streaming services that were available to us because it had been finished before the pandemic started. So, but then within a few weeks or months, we were running out. A lot of people felt like they were running out of stuff to watch, or but I it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I fully support Fran Drescher and what her work and what she's trying to do for the strikers. So, fingers crossed, and just keep sending love to the people, your favorite actors, who don't get $100 million a year for being in movies and don't have an alien cult being their bodyguards and everything, or whatever it is Tom Cruise has got going. But we should support that. But we can get into that later on.
Back in the late 80s and early 90s, I had Sarah leading the revolt. I didn't have the nanny.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah, no, that was a real popular meme.
Sarah,
in the 80s,
I thought it was going to be Sarah Connor.
Yeah, who knew it was going to be the nanny?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting remake of the Terminator movies, Yeah. I have to come back and save you. You are responsible for the revolution. Are you kidding?
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Oh man. Well, it's like somebody reminded me, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And so, at any rate. So, Chris, where can we find you, my good friend?
Thank you for asking, Joss. And I just want to give a shout out to the organizers of Otakon that just wrapped up today. Another fantastic event. It was so well attended here in Washington, D.C. that to get in on Saturday, the line, if you had a badge, wrapped around the building. That's how many people want to get in. And so people can find me at Verde Cosplay. And if you are in cosplay at Otakon, go to Verde Cosplay. It's very likely I might have you in my gram feed.
Yeah. And, of course, you can find me at meetup.org at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group. We're still always looking for members. And we got a lot of great events going forward for the rest of the year. You can find me at Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook, and my books, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural and The Adventures of Madison Brown, The Robot Repair Girl Chronicles, are still available on Amazon and Kindle. And I would really love it if people came and bought some books or just check them out for free on Kindle. They are also now becoming available in the libraries. So fingers crossed. And once again, we'd like to do a special shout out first to the great Will Wheaton, whose birthday was this weekend. Happy birthday, Will. And shut up, Wesley.
Yeah. Now, I'd rather send out a shout out to friend of the show, Robert Burns, who turned 50.
Yes, I was going to say, yes. Our dear friend Robert, or as we know him best as Bob. Bob's big birthday was this weekend, and we got to celebrate with him last night. We had a great time, and we love this guy a lot. And we're so thankful that he invited us to his birthday party. We hope we get to come to many more birthdays in the coming years. So once again, happy birthday, Bob. Thanks a lot, buddy. We appreciate you.
And shout out to your mom.
And yes, to his wonderful mom who attended. Lovely lady. And we thank you very much for making the trip to help us celebrate your wonderful son's birthday. Thank you.
And we cannot forget Lalita, his wife, who organized everything.
Yes. The brains behind the whole thing.
Definitely the brains behind it.
Yes. Yeah. She's Lalita is an incredible friend, and who has been, anybody knows her, she is probably the best friend you could ever ask for. So special shout out to her too. So and
it's time to wrap this up because I got to go to dinner.
Okay. All right. You go to dinner. Live long and prosper, everybody. Kapla. Come back next week.